joining me today. I am so excited just to have you as the first guest on this podcast. Someone that I've read your book, Selling from the Heart, the best-selling book. I've enjoyed your podcast, Selling from the Heart podcast, and some of the things that I want to get into today. I know how real you are, how your authenticity just shines through in what you do and how you sell. And from the book, some interesting things I saw was your background, how drugs got you into selling, and that was interesting. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, so yeah, so well, so first of all, I really appreciate this. It's great to connect in this way because I'm a big believer in this, John. That I'm not here to say how you do social, why you do social. I'm not the social police because there's a ton of people out there that pretend to be the social police.
Right.
But if you go into this, when I say this, meaning social, and you really throw the best version of yourself out there and you connect and you build relationships with meaning and you engage in heartfelt conversation, you meet the coolest people, and hats off because that's how we met.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also thought in your book, it's interesting. Your dad's very intelligent, very an astrophysicist or something like that. And but he had a conversation on a plane that really was someone in the copier industry that kind of guided your career, and that was interesting. Tell me a little bit about that, how that happened.
Well, so a couple things. So I have to go back to the very first thing you said because I want your listeners to realize that I didn't start my sales career because I was selling drugs.
Yeah,
So I want to tap into that for a second, but I'm going to tie my dad's story into this, and I think it'll give people a really clear idea of what made me me and why I got into sales. Is you spoke about my dad. My dad is a brainiac. My dad's a retired rocket scientist for the United States Air Force.
right.
So my dad got a PhD in aeronautical physics from 2 Ivy League schools by the time he was 20.
Wow.
And so that's what made him him. He was a bookworm, a book nerd. He's highly educated. Stuff just comes easy and natural when it comes to anything around education. I was the flip side. I hated school, couldn't stand school. I think in high school, if I got a 2.3 grade point average,
Yeah.
and I'm going back, but that's just, it just wasn't me. And then the way I was raised is if I wanted something out there, I had to buy it myself. I mean, granted,
Right.
my parents helped me out with things, but once I got to like 15 and a half, it's when, hey, if you want something now, you got to earn it.
Right.
And my very first job in high school was working in a pharmacy. And I write about it in Selling from the Heart.
Yeah.
And it was just after school, I would just deliver medicine to people who couldn't get out of their house. Vast majority of them were elderly or they were wheelchair bound or something like that. But that's when the relationship bug, John, kind of bit me,
Right.
is because, a lot of these people just wanted to talk. And so I started to listen, and I really understood what it meant to have heartfelt conversations with people, but still really didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I was just in high school, just going through the times back when I was in high school. And then something happened. I started paying attention to who was coming into the pharmacy, talking to the pharmacist and so forth. And I started seeing, men and women dressed up in really nice suits, whether that be, a suit or a woman's suit or something like that, fancy watches and all that. And I asked the pharmacist, I go, who are those people? And they said, well, they're pharmaceutical reps. So being an impressionable teenager, really not knowing what I want to do, I said, hey, I'll just become a pharmaceutical rep.
Right.
Just because I go, okay, that's kind of cool. They're wearing nice clothes, driving nice cars, right, and so forth. And so one thing led to another, and I go to college. I went to college just to appease my parents.
Yeah.
I probably got a 2.4 in college. I don't really care. I got the degrees, but this is the kicker. I was getting ready to graduate college, and my dad goes, son, you're going to have to find a job, right? Because he was raised, John, where you had to, like, right when you graduate college, your career is lined up. Those were the days, and that's how he was raised. Well, that's
Right.
not me. That was my dad. So I go, dude, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So my dad, traveling a lot, said this. He goes, "Hey, I was just coming back from a business trip, and I graduated." Just to kind of give people an idea, I'm 55 years old. I graduated college in the winter of 1987, and back then I still didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad was coming back from a trip, and he goes, "Hey, I was sitting next to a guy who worked for a copier manufacturer." And I remember having a conversation with him. Your name came up and you're getting ready to graduate college. And this guy says, "Hey, if your son can go out and sell copiers and last 1 year in sales, he's worth his weight in gold." So my dad goes, "Why don't you go sell copiers?"
Wow.
So he kind of pushed me into this.
Yeah.
Worst first year I ever had in sales. Horrible. It was, I cried and I cried and I cried. I made a whopping $18,000, John, my first year selling copiers in 1988. Worst freaking experience of my whole entire life. But I
Yeah.
stuck with it for one simple reason, is I wanted to prove to my dad that I was the best copier sales professional out there because of my dad being a rocket scientist. I didn't want to let my dad down because we're on polar opposites, right? He's a highly educated guy, and I was just, what I found out, I was street smart and book stupid. And that's what I did. I made the commitment that I was going to turn this into a career, and I was going to prove to my dad that I could do this.
Wow. And then 28, 30 years later, you have a fabulous career in the copier industry. One of the things in the book that I found just interesting, and it's kind of the theme of your book, and I see it a lot in your online activity, is the concept of the empty suit. And I see that a lot, and I think it's so prevalent right now. Talk about the empty suit, and how did that come about, and is that just something you've gained over the years, or is that just something you really feel?
It's how I really feel, and I push the button on things, John. I mean, you know it, right? I
Yeah,
mean, you've seen it. I don't do it to disrespect anybody. It's not the intent behind it, right?
right,
It is not to say, "Hey, I'm better than everybody else," and the whole sales profession's jacked up. Quite frankly, the sales profession's done it to themselves. So as an impressionable young person growing up, a young guy growing up in sales, one thing that I started to become really cognizant of was my surroundings. And when I say that, I was cognizant of how people are acting on, in the sales bullpen. I was cognizant of how they're talking on the phone. I was watching behaviors. I was listening in on conversations, not to eavesdrop, but I was just listening. I was astute to what was going on. Something else I started to do a while back, I started to ask my clients, and I started to ask in meetings that I was having, what do you like? What do you don't like about salespeople? Furthermore, what do you like? What do you don't like about copier salespeople? Now, John, this is going back into, the early 90s, mid 90s, things like that. And I started to uncover that the laundry list of everything they hated far exceeded anything that they liked.
right,
And what I did is I just did the complete opposite. I did the complete opposite of what everyone was sharing with me. I kind of packaged that all up, and I went to market with it. Now, I had life lessons along the way. Like, the longer you spend in sales, what I mean by life lessons is you're going to have aha moments. You're going to have times in your life where that meeting doesn't go well. You're going to be yelled at. You're going to be screamed at,
right.
and you're going to have many happy times along the way. But what I did is all those bumps and bruises I got along the way, I used those as learning moments. And what I found out was this: most salespeople out there are living a completely different life than they truly are. Let's think about that for a second. Most salespeople out there are living a sales life. I write about it in my book.
Right.
I expose it, that, it's the whole thing. And I learned this the hard way. It's compassion over commission. Most salespeople are leading with commission breath. They're saying all the things that need to be said in order to get that person to do business with them. And I'm keeping it simple, but I'm driving the point across that
Right.
if we fail to educate, if we fail to engage, if we fail to excite, if we fail to lead with insight, if we fail to keep our promises, if we fail to take care of the customer, if we fail to show how much we care, then you're viewed as an empty suit. And there's a lot of empty suits that are living and breathing and walking and talking in the sales world. And that's the point that I'm driving across, is to get them to think. Let's think about who we are and what we need to do. It's not about us. It's about your client. It's about your prospects. It's about your community. It's about your marketplace. And if you can put them in front of you, you'll have a really great career. That's what I'm bringing to the marketplace.
That's a interesting concept, the empty suit in the book. I'm talking with Larry Levine, the author of Selling from the Heart. He's also co-host of Selling from the Heart podcast. You said you really kind of reverse engineered what everybody else was, that feedback you were getting, you did the opposite. That's interesting because that's how you stand out. Typically that's what happens. So you talk to Fortune 500, to Fortune 100s, to small local companies, to world companies. What separates, in your opinion, you see these companies, you see their sales forces, you talk with them. What separates that guy or lady that is just a consistent performer and the one that seems to struggle? What do you see? What are the main things in your speaking and your teaching and over your career that you've seen?
A lot of things, but I'm going to hit on some things that probably many people aren't going to talk about. And I see this, and I'm going to preface what you said, because I think it's a great question. I'm going to lay this down, and it's going to be a hammer statement, but most salespeople out there are broken. Sales is broken, and there's a lot of individuals that are broken. And this is what I mean broken, is we fail miserably. I see this all over the place, John. We fail miserably at taking care of ourselves. And I'm not talking about, when I say taking care of myself, I'm not saying, routine dentist visits and routine checkups at the doctor and all that. Those are all important.
Right.
I'm talking about the inner self. I'm talking about what's in your heart, the self-care, the self-awareness, the self-reflection that we all need to do. So when it goes back to answering your question, what do I see some of the top people do? They really have a great sense of who they are. They hold themselves accountable to do the things that are necessary to stand out. They hold themselves accountable. They do the little things. When I say the little things, they're consistent. They're consistent at practicing, preparing, planning to do their job. They educate themselves. They never stop learning. They never stop growing. They place their clients up on a pedestal, and they ask their clients for feedback. They ask their clients for help. They're highly networked in their marketplace. They understand who they are, and they take care of their inner self. And they're massively, massively, massively disciplined to do it.
Do you feel in speaking with these organizations and talking with all of these sales performers individually and as groups, where are we at right now in 2020 from a sales organization standpoint in training our sales forces? What's your thought process on that? And not that we're here to bash anybody's sales training, but what do you see out in the sales force from a sales training standpoint?
Well, just to be blunt, there's not enough coaching, and there's tick box training. So let me explain.
Okay.
I'm not going to say, because there's some really great companies out there that do amazing job. They do amazing jobs with their sales team and all that. So I'm just, for every great sales company that engages in this, there's also some that have a really difficult time in doing this. Let's just use the word training, and this is just purely my observation and my viewpoint, and it's all the crazy things that go on inside my head. Most sales training is done at an event level. They tick box the training. Here we are at the beginning of the year. We do our sales kickoff. We bring somebody in, do some rah, spend a couple hours with our sales team. We trained them. Or it's a mid-year event, right? We train them. Let's bring somebody in for 90 days to do some training. And then there's no follow-up. And then they go, training doesn't work.
Another program on the shelf.
No, another program on the shelf. I was in environments where it was like that. I mean, it's hilarious, right? You bring the same person in 8 times over the span of 6 years to talk about the same thing, but management, right, doesn't hold anyone disciplined or accountable enough to do it. What I'd like to see happen is there needs to be more coaching. We need to bring more coaching into the sales community, into sales teams. And what I mean by that is disciplined, planned practice on a consistent basis where management and leaders are coaching their sales team, just like a head coach and a manager, however you want to identify as inside professional sports, they do the same thing.
Right.
Big
Absolutely.
big difference between training and coaching. Training to me, and I ask, right? A lot of times I'll ask VP of sales, I'll ask executives, over the last 6 months on your sales team, what's working, what's not working? What would you like to see done better? And it's really interesting is the responses that I hear back, hey, we could do a better job at coaching or training our sales team. Unfortunately, we view it as an event. More often than not, if people are upfront and brutally honest with me, they will tell you that training's an event.
Rather than
But
being something that's blended into their everyday practice in the
yes,
sales
so it's
profession.
here's what's interesting, because I'll ask VP of say anyone who's leading sales teams, whatever the date may be of the conversation, right? I'll just say, hey, John, as of today, right, whatever that date is, year to date, how many of your salespeople on your team right now are at or above their budget number? Whatever that budget number is.
Right.
The numbers are startling low. So then my next question is, then what are you going to do about it? And then I listen, and then I listen, and I listen, and I can hear a pin drop. And it all goes back to this. If you get what you get, right?
Yeah.
It's as a leader and a manager of a sales team, it's your responsibility to coach, train, nurture, and grow your sales team so that everybody on your team is at or above their budget number.
Yeah.
So then, the question is, you got some work to do. So if you're not training and coaching your sales team, then get what you get. But if you're south of 50%, which that's quite often the case, look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to help get my salespeople at or above plan?
Yeah. It's interesting that you see a lot of sales professionals that say, well, I'm not getting that training, or they're just not providing the training. And one of the things in your book that you said that stuck out, and it was on the piece in your book about continuing education, was, so I decided to become my own sales manager and teach myself.
Yeah.
And talk about that, because I think that is it's a thing in the sales profession today, is treating it like a profession.
Yeah, it's why I came up with that after my first year in the business. I mean, I told you in the beginning of this, the first year selling copiers, I made $18,000. I was on a dysfunctional sales team with a horrible manager, horrible. And I went back and I told myself, hey, if I'm going to make this a career, then I got to do something different. And it's just what's in me, right? What makes me me is different than what makes you, John.
Right.
But what made me me, and in that moment, I said, you know what? I'm going to hold myself to a higher degree of standards than anybody else. I'm going to become my own manager. I'm going to hold myself to a higher degree of accountability than anybody else. And that means I went on a learning expedition and I consumed information and I read books. So maybe a little bit of my father wore off on me a little bit as far as the quest to learn and the quest to educate. And I started to read and I started to, back then. So now I'm dating myself. So I was listening to tapes,
Yeah.
things like that in my car and so forth. And I started asking questions of people. And that's what I did. I became my own manager. I encourage everybody who's listening to think about this. When things don't go right and you don't hit plan, or you miss that sale, or you get some bad luck, don't point fingers at anybody else. Look in the mirror, because the finger's pointing back at you. So I just learned to have a no excuse mentality. If I didn't do something right, which led to something else, it was my fault. It wasn't my manager's fault. It was my fault. And that's, again, it's just because that's what made me me. And as time goes on, did it wear on me? Yeah, but that's what made me better. And that's what I would encourage salespeople to really think about. Is there's a big difference, and I write about it, between being a sales rep and a sales professional. It's a mental state of mind. No one forced you to get into sales. You chose the sales world. And when you choose the sales world, there's things that you signed up for that you must do on a consistent basis. And it's just interesting because there's just so few, and I say so few, salespeople out there that will invest in themselves. And how I know this, I ask one simple question. Tell me the last great book you read.
Yeah. And people will say, I
Well,
hadn't read one in
sometimes
years.
I say, well, I haven't read a book in years, right? And then mentally I'm going, oh my gosh, what's going on? Or they'll say, hey, I read, right, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think sometimes they'll just throw that out there because they know it's a book that everyone's read before.
Yeah.
But just the simple things like that, if you can't, and if you fail to invest $20 in a book, get out of sales. Sorry. I mean, I'm being point blank on that one.
Right.
But come on. You got no problem going out on a Friday and Saturday night and dropping $100 on a Friday and $100 on Saturday for a bar bill, but you can't invest $20 to help advance your sales career.
Yeah, the return on a book is so, if people just realize that, you know, selling from the heart, if you pick up one or two or three things from that book, I don't care if it's $100 for the book, your return is huge. If when you start reading the Jeb Blunts, the Weinbergs, the Hunters, the Iannarinos, when you start really reading those guys and studying their material, the return on that is exponential. And I think that's where people, like you said, it's a decision at that time. You can either be your own sales manager and really commit to learning and taking it as a profession, or you cannot. You got a choice.
Yeah, and you bring up a really great point, because I took that same philosophy throughout my whole sales career that you just mentioned, John, about finding one thing in a book. That's all I really wanted, right? If I read that book and I got one thing out of that book that could help me further my career, make that next sale, build that better relationship, enhance my conversations, is totally worth it. And that's the mentality I went in and reading the book. Still to this day.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I got to throw, if you allow me, I got to throw a sports twist in on this. So let's just look at, right? Let's look at Michael Jordan, or let's look at LeBron James, or let's look at, some of the other greats. Let's look at Tiger Woods. Let's just look at, I'll throw a soccer one out there, Ronaldo. peel back who they are, they hold themselves to a higher degree of standard than anybody else in their sport. They hire coaches, they watch what they eat, they invest in their mental state, they invest in their health, they invest in getting better every single day. And they don't wait for somebody to help them and tell them. So then my question to the sales world is, why? Why wait? Why wait for somebody to help you? Help yourself. If you're not willing to help yourself and lead yourself, then I'm going to question, how are you helping and leading your customers, your clients, however you want to refer to them, to do better business?
Absolutely. I'm talking with Larry Levine. He's the author of Selling from the Heart, best-selling book. He's also the co-host of Selling from the Heart podcast. Every week you can hear that podcast. Great guests. Larry, there's a big buzzword right now is authenticity. And I think it's probably right up there with the empty suit in your book. But I think authenticity is a powerful thing, and it can be powerful in the sales profession. But how do you translate authenticity into sales success?
It's wow. I'm gonna throw a lot at you on this one.
Okay.
But I'm gonna set it up this way. I'm gonna let you know, and I'm gonna let everyone who's listening know. I don't have a degree in psychology. I don't have a PhD in psychology. I don't have a master's in human behavior. Zero. Full transparency on this one. I got a PhD from getting the crap kicked out of me selling copiers in Los Angeles my whole life.
Yeah.
So, the things that I'm going to share with you, I just learned over time. But to get to the authenticity part of this, I truly believe in my heart, everybody's authentic. It's a choice that we make. I either want to be sincere, I want to bring substance, I want to be the best version of myself, or you choose not to. I always say authenticity is a lifestyle. It's not a light switch. It's not something you turn on when you feel it's necessary and turn off when you go to sleep. And I say this because, just bringing out the empty suit for a moment, spending almost 30 years in sales, and I love every aspect of sales. I'm a sales geek at heart. That I saw because I was schooled a long time ago, right? I was one of those salespeople out there that would place commission over everything else. Full transparency. It wasn't until I got some life lessons and I got scars on my knees and I got bloody elbows, just like anyone who spent any amount of time in sales is going to have. I just learned that if I wasn't the best version of myself, if I didn't roll it up, and when I say roll it up, if I didn't just open the window into who I was, it's going to be hard for somebody to get to know me. And we put that barrier up between us as salespeople and our clients. We put that barrier up between us and the marketplace. I learned a long time ago to remove the barrier. You get what you get with me.
Right.
And it stems from, and I say this and I'll drill on this. Everybody's got baggage. Everybody's got skeletons in the closet. Everybody's got ghosts. Everyone has those Caspers that are out there. So now I just dated myself because that's Casper the ghost. And I say this because in my opinion, in order to be truly authentic, you got to get vulnerable. And vulnerability starts with ourselves. We got to be willing to throw it out there. We got to be willing to say, this is who I am. But quite frankly, in sales, we pretend to be somebody else because sales is riddled with braggadocious and bravado behaviors. I can't do this, right? Because quite frankly, John, I get thrown at me all the time. Well, Larry, this is mushy gushy. This selling from the heart stuff is too gushy for me, too huggy, kissy, lovey dovey. Yeah, you're right. It is. But I will push back on this and say, hey, listen, in your personal life, whether you're married or not, whether you're in significant relationships, you know, family dichotomies and all that, I'm not here to turn these into Dr. Phil moments. But what I am here to tell you is this: it's hard to bring your heart to the forefront if your heart's broken. And there's a lot of broken hearts that are out there. I just learned a long time ago to mend my heart and come to grips with the baggage I have in the closet. And once I did, my relationships changed, my conversations changed, my sales skyrocketed because I wasn't pretending to be somebody else. I think a lot of times in sales, we're running away from who we really are to please somebody else. I just basically threw the middle finger up and said, you get what you get. This is who I am. But what I did and what I learned a long time ago is I went first. And what I mean by that, John, is I shared a piece of me with somebody else. If I wanted to, I'll use you as an example, John. If I was going to, if you are somebody that I'd really like to do business with, and I'm keeping it simple for the sake of, time on your podcast, is if you are somebody that I'd really like to do business with, your company is, a target potential of mine, and it fits my wheelhouse and all that. I'm going to learn as much as I can about you and your company. But then I'm also going to reveal something about me. I'm going to share a little bit about me, not how great my company is, not how great my product is, not how great my service is. I'm going to share something deep down inside of me that makes me tick, something personal about me. And when I started to do that, magic started to happen. Because if I did that with you, John, I could almost rest assured you would probably share something back.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, you stood out, when you open the heart, and when you start selling from the heart, you're not passing out a card, giving them a brochure and talking about your features and benefits. And quite frankly, that's, how a lot of us learned how to sell, right, wrong, or indifferent.
No, and I'm not, and I'm not here to say you do this and you don't do this. I'm not saying any of that.
Right.
What I chose to do and how I chose to transform my career and all that, it may not work for some people out there, and that's okay. But what I learned along the way was these three things. There's a lack of trust in sales straight across the board all over the world. The trust factor in sales is so low, I can step over it. People think many in sales are full of bull crap, and they're skeptical about everything that you have to say. Yeah, and that's a tough pill to swallow, but that's called reality. I learned out a long time ago that if I can work on building trust, remove the skepticism, and change the conversation to remove those radar ears that are going, oh, this guy's full of crap, this guy's full of crap, this guy's full of crap. That was it.
Yeah.
I wasn't the smartest sales guy out there. There was people that would outsell me, that could outsmart me, that had higher skill sets than me. But what I did learn was something that many in sales fail miserably at. And that's showing how much you care about somebody, how much you respect somebody, how much you appreciate somebody, and quite frankly, how much you love somebody.
Absolutely. That gives you that powerful intrinsic sales value when you're out selling, and really puts it into perspective of being, again, making it a profession rather than I'm just a sales rep. What would you tell? We're in unprecedented times right now as we talk about this. As we record this podcast, obviously there's a pandemic going on. What would you tell a sales professional right now? Maybe they've been laid off, or maybe things are tough. which they are. What do you tell that sales professional from a mental standpoint?
I think from a mental standpoint, and I've written about it, is double down on yourself. It was interesting, since you brought it up, John. Is I remember on the onset of this, I had choices to make, just like we all do, right? I could choose to watch the news. I can choose to do all these things. I chose not to. I chose to completely double down on me mentally, double down on my message, double down on my company, double down on my relationships, double down on networking, double down on conversations, as opposed to letting fear, because I think, the bigger issue out there is fear. That's the biggest thing that's going on. So, and I know, and I'm hyper sensitive to this. There's a lot of unfortunity that's happened, but I could sit here, right? We choose to waller. We choose to just sit in our own, house and just think and watch the news and do all these things. I would encourage people that are out there, this is the time to reinvest, right? This is the time to re-educate. This is the time to recapture. This is the time to get reacquainted with yourself.
Absolutely.
It's not the time. And again, please, people who are listening to this, I'm a very sensitive person, and I'm not meaning to say anything that's not sensitive, but we can choose how we act, and we can just succumb to all the noise that's out there. People have been dealt the what stick, and I get it, right? We all have in certain degrees.
Right.
But let's just use the time, right? Let's just use the time to reinvest in our mental state. Let's use some self-care, some self-love, some self-reflection, some self-awareness. Work on your mental state. Work on your relationships. Drive better conversations. Change your attitude. Those would be my vitamins and minerals for the day, John.
Awesome. Yeah, because the reality is this is going to pass, whether it passes in 60 days, 90 days, or a year. Those things that you do that you just talked about right now, I think that's key, because they set you up for that long-term success. And
I do want to stress, yeah, I mean, these are some pretty crazy, uncharted times as we're recording this. But folks, it's not going to be the last time something happens. Hopefully not to the degree it is, but I will let you know this. We all know this. Look back in history. As we're recording this and as what we're going through, it's not going to be the last time, folks.
That's right. 2008 and 9, we had a crisis. Now we're having this one, and there'll be more to come. It won't be the last.
Yeah.
It's history repeats itself, I guess, is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
All right, I got one last question for you, but before I get to that last question, I just want to take this chance to acknowledge you and just thank you for the 30 years of selling, for this book right here, Selling from the Heart, Larry Levine, the weekly podcast, Selling from the Heart podcast. He's a co-host of. Make sure you're listening to that. So I just wanted to acknowledge you just for what you bring to the sales profession, and the content that you bring every day, and the excitement and the vigor that you bring to the profession and what you do. And my last question for you is, you got one vitamin. You're talking with somebody, and all you can give them, all they're going to take away from you is this one thing, this one vitamin to enhance their sales professional career, to make them a better salesperson. What do you tell them? What's the one vitamin you give them?
I would say this, go take a B12 capsule. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just I had to throw that out there, John. I would say this, understand what it means to capture the morning. Capture the morning every single day. And what I mean by that, develop a plan, hold yourself accountable to it, and capture the morning. And I firmly believe it's what you do in the morning that's going to set you up for a very successful day. Learn what it means to develop a routine. My routine's the same thing 7 days a week. What works for me may not work for you. I get it and I understand it. But learn what it means to capture the morning. And unfortunately, many people don't capture the morning, John. They let the morning capture them, which means they, as an example, they hit the snooze button on their phone or their alarm 3 or 4 times before they roll out of bed. They roll out of bed, wipe their eyes, they run into the shower, get ready to go to work. They grab a banana and a cup of coffee and they're out the door.
That's right.
Wake up a half an hour early, wake up 45 minutes early, work on yourself first thing in the morning. The best vitamin you can give yourself is work on yourself. Capture the morning and don't let the morning capture you.
Awesome, man. I think anybody listening just got a whole jar full of vitamins. So tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of this book. Where's the best place to get a hold of Larry Levine and Selling from the Heart, and communicate with you?
You can find anything you want about Selling from the Heart at sellingfromtheheart.net. You can find the podcast link there. The podcast link you can find it on any podcast app that's out there now, including iHeartMedia and Podbean. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can find the book on Amazon, and you can find the Audible on Amazon as well.
Awesome. Do yourself a favor, run to your computer, get this book, start following Larry on LinkedIn. You will find yourself a better sales professional, but more important, a better person for it. So Larry, man, I'm so grateful for you just spending this time with me. And I know your time is valuable, so I'm grateful and thank you for today.
No, it's my pleasure. This was awesome. Thanks, John.
You got it.